All righty. Greetings and salutations on my beloved urban Simeons, my dear flying Mikey Constables, and what up, NVC sports fans. I am absolutely thrilled. First of all, sports fans, you know what I'm thinking right now. Second of all, I am Giovanni Cirucci. This is Resistance Rising. And this is this is so far, honestly, without any exaggeration, really, without any exaggeration, outside of publishing books, this is the pinnacle of my video effort to have these three gentlemen together in a stream. And I'm tentatively calling this the All Roads Still Lead to Rome Roundtable. These three gentlemen, long and short, I've known Tudor for a couple of years now. Max and Nathan, a little bit more recently, gotten in touch with them via their phenomenal shorts. These three gentlemen I would consider are the best and sincerest researchers, journalists in relation to the subject matter today of, indeed, all roads still lead to Rome. And I'm absolutely thrilled. I'll go around the horn. Max, it is absolutely thrilled to have you back after that interview. Nathan, I got to get Nathan on. Max, how you doing, bud?
Great, Johnny. Thank you for having me, sir.
Well, lots of great feedback from our interview. Nathan, I am really excited to have you here, young man. Open door. I know this is this is a sacrifice for you. You and I will talk offline. I'd love to get you in an interview as well. Thanks for showing up today.
Of course.
And of course, my beloved Tudor Alexander. Thanks, man. Really appreciate you. I run Tudor's vids in the background to learn. Okay, so that'll tell you where we're at and what's going on. In the meantime, I'll go back around the horn. I could just keep going on and on in relation to current events. Max has some stuff lined up. We'll start with Max as a topic. Please, guys, just jump in whenever you need to. Max, you've got some stuff ready in relation to the Orthodox Church. Of course, as far as I'm concerned, many people don't understand there's so much going on in the background with Orthodoxy, the different sects of Orthodoxy, but far more importantly is what I personally believe Orthodoxy is represented in Nebuchadnezzar's dream in Daniel chapter 2 is the second leg. There really are two legs in the same statue, so many similarities, and yet the Roman Catholic Church hates Orthodoxy. The Roman Catholic Church has genocided the Orthodox, mass murdered them throughout history, from stepping back and allowing the Ottoman Turks to conquer Constantinople, all the way through to actual Catholic clergy mass murdering Orthodox Serbs through the Catholic Nazi Ustashi. What a horrible and long history. And of course, let's not forget, I've got some sources on Joseph Stalin and his time at the Orthodox Seminary in Tiflis actually being taken over by Jesuits, and he knew it. And he knew that he was actually an ordained Jesuit. Max, do you want to start on Orthodox and go from there?
Yeah, I think you touched on a lot there, and I think that the biggest thing that we need to remember is Tudor will explain this very well. There's a lot of people in Orthodoxy that are very sincere in their beliefs, but in my opinion, I believe that they're sincerely deceived. Like a lot of Catholics, I grew up sincerely deceived. And in 1964, Pope Paul and Patriarch Athenagoras, and I might be butchering that pronunciation, they opened the way to ecumenism between Rome and Constantinople after centuries of opposition between one another. And that's kind of what Johnny's touching on is even though the Orthodox Church shares so many of the heresies of Rome for a long time, for centuries, there was enmity between the Catholic Church and the Orthodox Church. And then in 1964, there was a kind of sleight of hand, and Pope Paul and Patriarch Athenagoras, they kind of opened the door to ecumenism, which in 1965, it led to them formally lifting the mutual excommunications of 1054 that initiated the Great Schism. And in other words, the Great Schism no longer exists, meaning the Pope, claiming to be the bishop of all bishops, the pater patrum of Mithras. He is claiming to be the head of not only the Catholics, but also the Orthodox Church. And there's a lot of Orthodox that sincerely believe that they are, Protestants, that they're resisting the Catholic Church in some way. But again, since 1964, you would be disagreeing with the head of your own church. And there's a lot of people that might say, well, I understand the church better than they do, but in reality, they're the ones running the church. And I think it becomes abundantly clear that the Orthodox Church, like you said, even though they've been persecuted for so long, are now being brought back into the fold of Rome. And so many Orthodox people are waking up, like I woke up as a Catholic, and beginning to realize that these are two wings of the same bird. And unfortunately, they will do anything to get you into the Catholic heresies. And I think Tudor can kind of jump in here, or
absolutely. This is his background.
Sure, Nathan would love to jump in, but
indeed, this is Tudor's background. He knows this very well, and Tudor, this is also in play in Ukraine. This goes back all the way to the Holodomor, and then 2014 resurgence, the so-called invasion of Crimea by Russia, and then the so-called Russia-Ukraine war. And deeply at the bottom of this is Catholics in Action, the CIA. The poor people of Ukraine are given two choices. You've got the Nazi side, or you've got the Soviet side, and they're two sides of the same coin.
Yeah, it's really interesting to watch. I've been watching Orthodoxy, I mean, obviously for a while, but the war with Ukraine, to me, just screams of creating. One thing the Jesuits are really masters at, and you can look at this in the history of the United States, is they know how to use something's strength as its weakness. So with the United States, the strength of the United States, it was a unique government in history in that it had like a plurality of leadership, which is very Christian. It had the plurality of the states as a leadership, which is a very good idea. And so the Jesuits said, all right, that's not good for us. So we'll just make them fight against each other. That's how you take advantage of the weakness. So in the same way, I think what's going to happen with Orthodoxy, and what's already happening, is you see them taking advantage of the autocephalous nature of their church, which is that the Orthodox don't have a pope. They have an ecumenical patriarch, which is kind of the brother among equals, but he's not the pope. They're still patriarchs. And so they have a plurality of leadership in essence, which is, something that they're going to take advantage of with all of these dialectics and chaos. The Russians are Orthodox, and so are the Ukrainians, at least on paper. And so there's a lot of civil wars happening. Greece, same thing. There's conflicts there with, I forget who, but there's, everybody has their views of what Orthodoxy is. And I think they're going to use those differences between these people and create a more ecumenical situation, especially now with the 1700th anniversary of Nicaea. Oh my gosh, the Bartholomew, the ecumenical patriarch, and what's his name, Pope Leo, were just hugging and kissing through the field all day long. I mean, this is a huge deal that they celebrated this common anniversary, and the Pope is really pandering to them by saying, oh, it's okay, we don't need to worry about doctrinal issues. The filioque, we can give that up, it's not a big deal, So it's just really interesting to see this happening, and I think, like you said, it's a sign of the end, really. I don't know if Nathan wants to drop anything in there.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at all the mainstream talking points, like Candace Owens, Nick Fuentes, everyone is Roman Catholic, and I want to cite Tudor Alexander's research on this. Like, we basically live in a Roman Catholic echo chamber, and I mean,
it's pretty crazy when you look at how many of these people are Catholic. When you actually people look at early life for the Jews, like, oh, you got to go to Wikipedia early life. Well, what about the Catholic side of things? Like, they're all Catholic, bro. Like, it's just crazy.
Yeah, and I mean, it seems to me like very obvious, and I think it's very obvious for anyone with eyes to see and who actually studied history, that they always create the problem so they could institute the solution. And obviously, the problem that everyone is screaming for a solution for right now is the Jews, or this idea of a Jew world order. So if you have eyes to see, you're going to know that they're going to have the solution prepared for this, quote, problem already, and that solution is some sort of universal church, universal religion, or some merging of like that universal church with the state. some sort of fascist regime, similar to like how the Nazi Party came into power, which was itself also facilitated by the Jesuits. If you do your research there, yeah, the Jesuits they basically institute the problem, and then they institute the solution for the same problem that they're creating. So
absolutely brilliant, Nathan. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely brilliant. And listen, I want to throw in real quick something sort of related. They are hiding in plain sight. They are hiding in plain sight. It's fascinating that you've got great points by all of you guys. How many people know that Candace Owens, Nick Fuentes, honestly, I've said this many times on my show, Nick Fuentes came out of nowhere. He came out of nowhere, and suddenly he's huge in the alternative conservative community. Russell Brand, Bongino, all these guys popping up out of nowhere, and they're all Catholic. And they're all saying the same thing. I have almost 400 names out of Hollywood across the decades when everyone says, from Gary Oldman to Jewish Michael Richards to very, very Catholic Mel Gibson, oh, the Jews run Hollywood. You have no idea the number of Jesuits, all the way back to the bottom of who created the motion picture code, a collared Jesuit, Daniel Aloysius Lord, who wrote the rule book on whether or not you're allowed to publish in Hollywood. And nobody knows the power of the Catholic side of Hollywood. I'm just using that as an example. It's not as important as the war makers, as the Pentagon, as the CIA, as the FBI, but as an example of what Nathan's saying. Everybody sees these nefarious Jewish names, and nobody realizes that behind them are many more Catholic names. Max, you have something on that?
Well, I just think it's interesting you brought up Nick Fuentes, and both of you are talking about, this kind of push from Catholic, authorities, so-called authorities on history and politics, their attempt to shift blame, and peg everything on the Jews. When I was a member of Turning Point USA, I actually debated Nick Fuentes in person. And Nick Fuentes had a crowd of people gathered around him, and he was making claims that, the Jewish state doesn't have a right to exist because it's created to protect a specific religion. And I said specifically to him, I said, I'm not defending, Israel and the Zionists in Israel, but Nick, if you're condemning Israel because they are a nation created to protect a specific religion, shouldn't you hold the same sentiment towards the Vatican? Aren't you a Catholic? And, the crowd kind of erupted. And I wish I had that video to play. I didn't know you were going to bring him up, but I just think it's so true that they're making such a conscious effort to blame Israel when Israel was created in the 40s, and the Catholic Church have existed, according to them, they've existed since St. Peter was walking on earth. So if you put that in perspective, who's really been in control? Have people been in control that have been in control since 1945? Are they running
Max,
the world?
yeah, let me not to step on your pal, but the Catholic Church is proud to trace its lineage all the way back to military Rome, and that tells us so much. No entity has mass murdered more Christians than the sovereign city-state of Rome. If you combine military Rome and religious Rome, no entity. Let's just go ahead. I've got a great quote on it. I have to pull it up. But listen, it's a totally separate issue as to the swinging pendulum, and I'll show that GIF that I created of this massive distraction. Love the Jews, hate the Jews, love the Jews, hate the Jews. Good Christian Zionists, well-meaning, not good, well-meaning Christian Zionists are just as at fault as all of the Free Palestine, far left, hate the Jews crowd. They are just as at fault. They are being played just as much. They don't know their Bibles. Paul was very specific. Romans 9, 10, and 11, Galatians 3 and 4, and our beloved Adventists nail this. Our beloved Adventists nail this well. There is fleshly Israel and there's spiritual Israel, and the only one that matters is spiritual Israel. I'm sure that Tudor has an opinion on that.
Yeah, what's interesting to me is that I mean, just to tie it back into current events, is you notice a lot of these Catholic heroes now, like that Carrie Prejean Bowler, who got removed from the Religious Liberty Commission. Such a Jesuit theater with that, and now she's the shining star, the hero of the people, the patriot, the true American patriot that is exposing dispensationalism and saying, look, no, we Christians are the true Israel, which of course this is how the devil works. I mean, he uses a truth, and then he bakes in the assumption and the counterfeit with it, which is that we Christians are spiritual Israel with it, which in parentheses for her means the Catholic Church is Israel, the institutional, universal visible church is Israel, which is the typical institutional amillennial view of the Catholic Church is that basically Christ is ruling, which is a biblical fact. I mean, you look in 7 books of the New Testament, and it tells you that Jesus is sitting at the right hand, which is the definition for the ruling period. So it's already begun. He's ruling, but the Catholic Church says that Jesus is ruling through us. He's sharing his power through the Pope. So you have to obey the Pope, otherwise you're disobeying Jesus. So this is the counterfeit that is now in the world. I actually have an episode I didn't plan on making, but I'm going to be making it now on this whole Christ is King thing. How Christ is King since Pope Pius XI has become now it's so fascinating too. My goodness, they really play both sides because on one side they have the Vatican II liberal ecumenical agenda with we love everybody, come on back to mama, that whole thing. But in reality, they also play the hardcore conservative side with ecumenical shenanigans, which is fascinating. I've really dug into this recently through the whole Christ is King thing that is now I'm seeing like a lot of hardcore Calvinist Protestants and Reformed people just like Christ is King, and they're always like dropping the mic with Christ is King after every time they shut down a liberal or some sort of Zionist situation, like Christ is King, and they don't realize like where does that phrase come from? Like, yes, is it biblical? Yes, Jesus is ruling right now. That's a biblical step. That's a fact. But what is the spirit behind that phrase? And the spirit is that the origin of that phrase comes from Pope Pius XI in the early 1920s in response to the boogeyman of secularism. And really his intention with that is basically, listen, the state needs to be subservient to the church. And so now it's become, if you follow the history of this through all of these leapfrog organizations like the Heritage Foundation, the John Birch Society, the Council for National Policy, the Family Research Council, all these little Knights Templar organizations, you follow them and you see how there's this interwoven thread between these hardcore Protestants that are theonomists and people who basically want theocracy, and Catholics and Templars and these Knights of Malta members that are obviously loyal to the Pope. Well, one of those sides is going to win, and the other side is just getting played, and they think that they've found an ally in Rome, which is absolutely stupid. But this is what it is.
Yeah.
They're deceived. And so you have these ecumenical things happening constantly, and it's just profound that people are immune to it, and you're going to see more and more of it. You're going to see more and more of it. Even like that Joe Kent guy. Was it Joe or John Kent? I forget. The guy that was he recently resigned because of the Iran whatever conflict. He's like Catholic. He's resigned. Everybody's like picking on him, and he's become this pariah. The Catholics are raising up these people in culture. I'm noticing this is gosh, there's so much to talk about, man. So much going on right now. So much going on. My God, they are shifting. It's truly a thing to watch. They are shifting American patriotism by collapsing MAGA. They are shifting American patriotism into Catholic social teaching. They are shifting it very carefully and very systematically with these patriots, in quotation marks, that are being risen up. This Joe Kent guy, I'm saying Joe, I think it's Joe. I forget his first name, but I think it's Joe Kent. Anyway, Kent, he resigned. He was the whatever director of security or something like that. He resigned recently because he's been protesting the Iran war. And of course, he's like the typical, like white, like good looking, he's got a family, he's got kids. His first wife died in the war and all this kind of stuff. And all the conservatards, all the MAGA Zionists are like, you're a traitor. And of course, everybody's like, how could you call him a traitor? He's a true patriot. And in doing this, we are now seeing the dissolution of MAGA, which is this controlled demolition, which was always the purpose, so that the Catholic patriot, if you could even say such a thing, because if you're a Catholic, you're not a patriot. You're loyal to Rome. There's no such thing as patriotism. But this is the thing that's being born out of the ashes, is this Catholic patriotism and reinventing America as this Catholic vassal state, which is so phenomenal to watch. It's really crazy.
It's disturbing because of the deception, Nathan. It's disturbing because of the deception. You have these. I'll tell you, Nathan. I'm at a point where I honestly feel that the Iran war, nobody from a military perspective, nobody in the military community, nobody at the Pentagram, which, by the way, is modeled after the Farnese family castle. Nobody knows that. Laid on September 11th, 1941, would ever say, okay, listen, we're going to attack a Muslim nation. We're going to take in, we're not going to do the Skull and Bones 41 Bush plan back from decades ago and get a coalition of everybody else. We're going to take one partner with us, and it's Israel. Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? Honestly, Nathan, I'm at a point where I feel like the entire purpose of this war is for the purpose of Jew baiting. We've got Tudor brought up these great issues. It is Joe Kent, by the way. You've got Joe Kent and Candace Owens speaking the truth from our perspective. We're not going to war with those Jews just to kill. There's no sense to this war. And so they are allowed to be the voices of reason. You have these doppelgangers, these overt Catholics pretending to be Christians, like Carrie Prejean Bowler, the model, with her sex tape, married to an NFL quarterback. Oh, the NFL, don't get me started. You've got the Kirks, and so they're supposedly evangelical, when of course they weren't. They aren't. They are full on Catholic. I just sent you earlier of just a whole bunch of these doppelgangers. And oh, by the way, as you see in Europe and you see elsewhere, as the corrupt Jesuit machine has these governments pushing migrants, especially in Europe, pushing in these Asian, Muslim, African migrants in. They come out with these guys, this controlled opposition like Stephen Christopher Yaxley Lennon. Oh, I'm sorry, Tommy Robinson. That's his British. Oh, Tommy Robinson, Stephen Christopher Yaxley Lennon. And they come out and they tell you that if you want to fight the Muslim hordes, you need to go back in time and be a knight of the Catholic Church. Nathan, anything on this, on all these topics?
Yeah, I mean, I resonate with what you said in regards to like all this Jew baiting. Obviously, the whole point of all the Jew baiting is to make it look like the Jews are the evil guys, so that like by contrast, the other people who are like pointing their hands at the Jews, they look like the good guys. And who are the people who are pointing their hands at the Jews? It's mostly Roman Catholics, right? And I find it interesting that, Candace Owens did like a 3-part docuseries on Erica Kirk, where she dives super deeply into her history. And she goes into all these Jew connections, but she completely like skips over the part that she's Jesuit trained. It's like she does not mention that one time. And I feel like that should tell you everything you need to know. And it's really sad how many people are falling for this ruse that the Jesuits are Jews, when, they did a really good job of trying to make it look like they're Jews. But if you actually look at what they've actually done for the Jews, they haven't done anything for the Jews. They've actually done a lot against the Jews. They've played a key role in pushing anti-Semitism, which became like through their Civilita Catholica issue, and that became the basis for like Nazi fascism. And like Karl Marx was obviously a Jesuit tool, and he literally, despite being a Jew himself, he published anti-Semitic works where he described Jews as like being like some sort of parasitic force that needs to be eliminated. So obviously, are these people like Jewish supremacists working towards a Jew world order, or is the answer a little bit more discreet, or they're actually just pawns in a bigger game, right? And the whole point is to make you hate them. That's the whole point, because they're going to be, I'm going to cite Tudor Alexander again. They're the disintegrating hand for the integrating hand, which is Rome. It's wonderful. He put it wonderfully when he said that. So.
Nathan, Erica, it's not just that Erica was at least twice, once at Notre Dame, once at Loyola out of Los Angeles, and I think she's got another Jesuit institution on her resume, but she's a devout Catholic. Her mother's a devout Catholic. Her mother was involved in Homeland Security. They had to move to Arizona so her mother could facilitate her role in Homeland Security. Karl Marx was the archetypal puppet Jew. You could see them orchestrating this, planning this out. We need this massive genocidal machine called communism, and we're going to put a Jewish name and a face on the front of this. The mere fact that, number one, he was Jesuit trained in Trier in a Catholic enclave in Germany. And number two, we've got sources. Now, granted, they're controversial. Alberto Rivera says that he was spoon-fed the tenets of the Communist Manifesto while in a private reading room at the British Museum. Now, it is an historical fact that Karl Marx studied in a private reading room at the British Museum. Alberto Rivera just steps in and says, because of my private briefing from Augustine Bay, a powerful Jesuit cardinal, I can tell you what was going on in that private meeting room. And history backs him up, guys. 100 years earlier, the Jesuits themselves put truth to power, put Augustine's anti-property ID as an ideology.
Thomas Aquinas.
Thomas Aquinas, my bad. Put Thomas Aquinas' anti-property ideology, truth to power, and the revolution. I'll come up with it. The communist enclaves in Paraguay and South America. And
the reductions.
Thank you. Reducciones there in South America. They had it. They knew what they were doing. Oh, and what was the name of was it the Scorsese? The Mission, right? The Mission. And they gaslighted in Hollywood with the oh my goodness, the Jeremy Irons and De Niro and all those guys. De Niro was like Loyola himself, right? Coming to the rescue. Meanwhile, they were beating down the Guarani Indians. They knew they had it all, carefully wrote it down, how communism works, and then they gave it to a Jew to be the name in the face. Tudor, I know you want to jump in. Please go ahead.
Well, yeah, I mean, you see them playing both sides typically, and so, if Alberto Rivera's testimony is there, we know for a fact that a Jesuit wrote Mein Kampf for Hitler. So there's that. And so obviously they have their puppets all the time. I would not be at all surprised that the Jesuits fed, what's his name, Karl Marx, the material. His partner Engels was a quote-unquote Protestant, but of course by then Protestants were Freemasons and loyal to the occult. So these things are just, to me, just the synagogue of Satan. A lot of people look at synagogue of Satan and say, oh, it's just the Jews. But Revelation was written after the New Testament was compiled. And if we are to take things as sequential revelation, then Paul, who wrote Romans and Corinthians and Galatians first, and who said that to be a Jew is basically to be a Christian, to be a believer in God, then defines the term Jew as it's supposed to mean in the New Testament. And so when the book of Revelation talks about the Jews who say they are Jews but are not, but are a synagogue of Satan, people think that that's just like the six-pointed star club, but it's not. I mean, God isn't warning you about obvious stuff. Like, he's not warning you about like, oh, look, those devil-worshipping Jews that are kidnapping kids and drinking their blood. Like, you got to watch out for them. Like, yeah, you know that they're evil. What you should watch out for are people who say they're like you, i.e. Jewish Christians in the first century who were Jews and worshiping God in the synagogues, but they were also worshiping Christ. And they say, well, they're part of you and they're doing the same things as you, but actually they're part of a synagogue that worships the devil. That's a much more like discerning type of situation. And you see that throughout history because all these people, Freemasons, Rosicrucians, Jesuits, they all claim to worship God on the outside. Even the secret societies that invaded Islam right after Muhammad's death, like the Assassins, the Fatimites, and all these people, they say they worship God, and yet they actually worship the devil. Really, same thing with the Jews and their mystical rabbis and all the Kabbalah and Zohar and everything. They say they're worshipers of God, but in fact they're actually worshiping the devil, and they've admitted that. Several rabbis have admitted that. So what do you have? You have a group of people who are duplicitous, who are saying one thing and doing another. And people are focusing on the obvious. One thing, just to go back to what Nathan was saying with all this Jew exposure, one thing that's like, to me, just so obvious, like, is just you don't have to be like a scholar. You don't have to know all this history. You just have to like think critically. If the devil is the god of this world, and the Bible tells you that only Jesus Christ can come and defeat the devil, then do you really think that when these things are being exposed, that the devil is like getting defeated by like goodwill, people uniting together, and we the people are going to vote the devil out, and we're going to team up, and we're going to conquer this evil system together. Like, is that what's going on, or is the devil like deceiving people into the final trick? Because if it's obvious, it's not the final trick, because the world is going to marvel after the beast. The world's going to be corrupted with spiritual delusion. It's going to be thinking that we've made it, we've defeated the devil, and yet that's the final trick. So
Well,
to me, if it's obvious, then I know right away that it's not the last thing.
I'm
That's just
gonna
the
I'm
simple.
gonna bring Max in because he's I know he's got stuff on this. Me personally, Tudor, I feel strongly about this. There's a delicate balance between the hubris of the Catholic fake resistance and the simple Christian that has the authority in Christ to take a stand and needs to take a stand anytime, any place. We are
Sure.
the simple average Christian is not going to change the world, but they also have a responsibility to take a stand
Yeah, agreed.
for anything that is on their conscience, whether it's abortion, whether it's and so as you've been rightly pointing out on your program, the Christian nationalism is a fraud. It's absolute astroturf. There's no such thing. It is completely Catholic and fabricated. Completely different from the power and authority of the simple Christian on the street, simple Christian anywhere, with the power and authority as a son of God through the blood of Jesus Christ. Completely, totally different. Max, I know you're writing notes. What do you got, bud?
Well, just to kind of go off what you just said and what Tudor just said, this is absolutely the synagogue of Satan. And what all these people have in common is, unfortunately, they're serving the devil. I just think it's interesting you brought up Christ is king. The Bible says that many will come in my name claiming to be Christ and will deceive many. And the Bible also says that the devil is the prince of this world. And in the end, there will be an antichrist who sits in the temple that claims to be God, claims to be above all that is called God, and will make people worship him. So I think it's interesting that they're proclaiming this Christ is king business. It's just going back to what Nathan said. I'm sorry. This is the, one world religion that they're trying to get everybody into. The word Catholic itself actually means universal. And, they believe they are Israel. So when you say that, the universal religion is Israel, they're saying that we're all Israel. And so this is kind of this Luciferian kind of Roman thinking that you kind of touched on. They trace their lineage all the way back to military Rome. They believe that, they are the Roman gods, are the gods of not just Rome, but of the whole world. So, you got these pariahs like Nick Fuentes, that are, calling Protestants not Christian, and, they're calling for crusades. They're forcing people to say Christ is king on Instagram, like it's like those posts that say like this if you're not Christian. It kind of gives me that kind of a vibe to it. I kind of feel forced into saying it. And again, what Christ is king? Is it Jesus Christ, Yeshua HaMashiach, or what Christ is your king? I think is the question that we need to be asking. The thing with the Jesuits not only wrote Mein Kampf, which is true, but what I think is interesting is Iran. You were bringing up Iran. The Hitler and Nazi Germany actually declared Iran an Aryan nation, and they said that Iranians were not subject to the Nuremberg laws because they were of pure Aryan blood. So I think it's so interesting that you have all of these Catholics that are jumping to the defense of Iran. I'm not defending the Iran war. I don't think we should be going to a war with Iran at all. But I think it's interesting that you have all these Catholics that are jumping to the defense of Iran, just like Adolf Hitler did. And it's interesting, they're the same people. Nick Fuentes is the same person that said Adolf Hitler was really cool. Even though he knew he was a pagan, he said Hitler was really effing cool. So I think that all these things are tied together in more ways than one. And we're seeing the Jew baiting, like you said. We're seeing these scapegoats like Karl Marx, like the Rothschilds, which may look Jewish on the outside, but on the interior, they're really just Jesuits, like the Freemasons, like the Assassins, like the Fatimites. There's a quote from a Catholic priest who says that Fatima is the second holiest woman in heaven after Mary, and Fatima is considered the mother of Muslims. So, just like Tudor said, just like Nathan said, and just like you've been saying, all roads lead to Rome, my friends. It's not something that we're proud to say, but it's the truth. And we're proud to expose the truth and bring people out of the harlot.
Amen. Amen.
And, I don't want to take up too much time.
No, not at all. Not at all. Nathan, Tudor mentioned earlier that Mein Kampf, Hitler's tour de force on the Jews and the banksters, was ghostwritten by a collared ordained Jesuit, Bernard Stampfel. I have a massive folder. Hitler, of course, being an Austrian Roman Catholic, choir boy at the Abbey at Lambach, where he found the swastika in the heraldry of the headmaster there, Father Theodorich Hagen. Albert Hartl, Roman Catholic priest, vicious SS informant. Alfred Jodl, nephew of University of Vienna psychologist Friedrich Jodl. Alois Hudal, Austrian bishop, openly supported the Nazis during the war. Hey, the Reichskonkordant in 1933 ushered in the Nazi state. The Third Reich gave the stamp of legitimacy to the Third Reich thanks to the Catholic Church. Amon Goth, wealthy aristocrat, Roman Catholic Nazi SS monster. Andrei Hlinka, the Roman Catholic Slovak priest who got Hitler to invade Czechoslovakia. Austin App, invited to teach Holocaust denial, Jesuit Scranton, Roman Catholic LaSalle. That's pausing. That's just the A's of my folder on the connections between the Third Reich and Nazism and the Catholic Church. Matthew 24, Jesus said, "Many will come in my name." Who qualifies for that? Who qualifies for making themselves the little horn of Daniel, equal with Jesus Christ himself? I just had an epiphany listening to you guys where they're saying, hashtag Christ is King, Christ is King, Christ is King. Okay, well where is he? Oh, hey, I'm the Pope. I speak for him. Okay, hey, Christ is King, and it's me. I'll go ahead and take up for him. 2 Thessalonians 2:3-4. The man of perdition sits. I was thinking about this morning, guys. Sits in the temple. What a blasphemy. No high priest, first of all, there's no chairs in the Holy of Holies. No high priest would dare to sit in the Holy of Holies. Who sits? When Paul tells you that the temple is us, every believer by the blood of Jesus Christ is a living temple, then it is the little horn of Daniel that seeks to take over and to own you, unum sanctum. They sit in the temple and blaspheme him. Any of this, Nathan, please throw in with what your opinion is.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting how they try so hard to try to hide the Jesuit influence, especially when it comes to the Nazi Party, because the whole strategy of the Jesuits is to make them look like they're just Jews and like Jew sympathizers. So if people start to catch on that like the Jesuits played a role in the rise of the Nazi Party, that whole ruse is obliterated. And one thing that I shared with you, Johnny, a while ago is that it used to be on Wikipedia that Bernhard Stampfel, it explicitly labeled him as a Jesuit, and that he helped to write Mein Kampf. But now they erased the Jesuit, and now he's just like Roman Catholic priest. So that helps to separate this idea that the Jesuits are actually like anti-Semitic, which is like, the number one ruse that people are falling for is that the Jesuits are Jews. And, what else? And, like Barry Shamish, he did some really excellent work that I feel like is ignored too much on how like the Vatican is actually the one that controls Jerusalem. And that should tell you everything you know. Like, why would the Vatican want to control Jerusalem? It's because they need to control that area in order to perform their Jesuit theater that most people are probably going to fall for, because they fell for the Jesuit false ideology of futurism, which most people also don't know about. Like futurism formed the basis for the idea that the Antichrist is some future individual to distract people from the idea that the Pope is the Antichrist. And that idea, through dispensationalism and the Schofield Bible, it infected a lot of Protestant denominations, and now a lot of people just like naively believe that the Antichrist is some future individual, when that literally came from the Jesuits and their sly tactics. And yeah, the Jesuits are very cunning. They're never in the spotlight. They plant the seeds. They plant the seeds of the ideology, and then they shove other people to perpetuate that idea. And dispensationalism is one, which is the basis for Christian Zionism. That's one that's one example of that.
Amen. So. If no one's seen or heard of the Israeli journalist Barry Shamish, poor guy, he was cut off early in life, like late 50s, early 60s, I believe. He was just a phenomenal source on the Vatican insurgency in Israel. Max, I'm going to let you prime Tudor because I know you've got stuff, and I want to also mention Nathan's phenomenal point look, I discuss this all the time. Who really runs the world? All you need to do is go to the pulpit of the typical evangelical Protestant fundamentalist church, and they're all preaching Jesuit heresy. They're all preaching 500 years ago. If you ask any brave, brand new Christian who broke away from the Catholic Church, who is the Antichrist, they would all tell you. Luther, Calvin, Knox, Zwingli, and before them, Wycliffe, Peter the Valdense's founder, Peter Waldo, all of them, Jan Hus, they would all tell you every pope is Antichrist. Every pope is Antichrist. Now today, they all teach the pre-tribulation rapture from Manuel de Lacunza. And by the way, Manuel de Lacunza wrote The Coming of the Messiah and Glory and Majesty pretending to be a Jew, Rabbi Juan Yehoshaphat ben Ezra. Here we go again. We have Jesuits pretending to be Jews, not the other way around. Futurism, Francisco Ribera, Jesuit, dispensationalism, Bellarmine and Lacunza. Oh my goodness, Max,
don't forget preterism too.
Of course, preterism. You don't have to look at you don't have to look at eschatology because it's already taken place. It's already done. Tudor, if you want to jump in instead, go ahead and we'll have Max round it out. Go ahead.
I was going to say that's the preterism. It's interesting because that is also the foundation of all this Christian nationalist, Christ is King, NAR kind of stuff. Because you see what happened very quickly after the Protestant Reformation is the original reformers, their eschatological view was amillennial in the sense that they realized Christ is ruling, but not in the way the Catholic Church says. It's because this is counterfeit. Christ is ruling in heaven. It's a mysterious heavenly rule. So there's that. But then it's so funny how they came back to their mother, man, in fulfillment of God's word. They are coming back to their mother, and they came back to their mother very quickly because within, I think, I don't know, maybe 100 years or something, you started to see the rise of post-millennial eschatology coming out of Protestantism. So post-millennialism is the idea that, yes, Christ is ruling now, but through the church, it's really the same thing. And we're going to just Christianize society. We're going to conquer the 7 mountains for Christ, and we're going to do a great job. And then when that golden age comes, Jesus is finally going to come. So it's actually, the funny thing about it, it's a synergistic eschatology. It is a synergistic eschatology. It's no different than all the crazy, rabid, frothing at the mouth Zionists saying we need to make the Jews build a temple so Jesus can come. Wait a minute, if Jesus is the self-existent creator, why would he depend on you to fulfill his word? Like, that doesn't make sense.
Is that any different from Romans chapter 6, where Paul says there are heretics out there, not heretics, his word, people out there saying, well, I need to sin more so that Jesus' grace will be poured out more. What are you talking about? Are you kidding me?
Yeah, it's really silly. It's really silly. But preterism is used to justify these things because if everything's been fulfilled in 70 AD, then there's no more need for worrying about what the Bible has to say. That doesn't concern us. So it's just going to keep getting better, and we can take control of society, and you don't have anything to worry about. So that deception was also a Jesuit deception by Luis de Alcazar. And actually, interestingly enough, I have like a 6-hour video on Satan's Little Season, which is another psyop happening right now that's really gaining a lot of traction as the dispensational narratives collapses. People are moving obviously into other deceptions. And if you look at Satan's Little Season, which is basically the idea that you're in this one giant Left Behind novel, which is even worse than dispensationalism, where there was this golden age in the past at some point, and now Satan's just been running amok for 1,000 years or whatever they say, because everybody has a different measurement of it. But if you look at that, it also traces back to the Jesuits, because after about 100 years after Luis de Alcazar, you had another Jesuit named John de Hardouin in France, who was quite a character. If you look into him, he had quite a lot of very revisionist, crazy ideas. Obviously, the man didn't believe that God is sovereign. And he really started this idea that, listen, you can't trust history. It's not something that God even has control over. It's all been a lie. And then you later have people like Anatoly Fomenko, obviously, and all these things that came out of the 70s. And now people are so deluded by these things, not realizing that all of them really have the same antichrist source, designed to subvert God's sovereignty, subvert your trust in the Bible, subvert your belief that God's word can come true of its own because he decreed it in history. It's just really phenomenal. So,
Max, I want to mention real quick, and then whatever it is that you're feverishly writing down, long before there was anything called a crypto Jew, long before there was anything called a crypto Jew, we had crypto Jesuits and crypto papists. One of my favorite citations on this is Lord Robert Montague, 1886, Recent Events and a Clue to Their Solution, where he calls lying Dick Talbot, Earl of Tyrconnell, an Irish member of the House of Lords, a crypto Jesuit because of the insurgency that he did during the prime ministry, the administration of Benjamin Disraeli, and who, by the way, died on 19 April in 1881. No, don't want to throw you off. Whatever it is you got going, and then we'll go to Nathan after that. Go ahead.
Well, I love it. Just to go off what everybody's been saying, like you said, Luther, accused the Pope of being the Antichrist and said, though we've cared for Babylon, we must now abandon her that she might become the habitation of specters and witches. And, see, two things can't be true at the same time. Either the Pope is an Antichrist or he isn't. Either Luther is right or he is wrong. And so I think it's so ironic that they actually erected a statue of Martin Luther in the Vatican, because if Martin Luther called the Pope the Antichrist and you're putting a statue of him in the Vatican, that should tell you everything you need to know about the Catholic Church. Two things can't be true at the same time. It's the order out of chaos thing, and that goes back to the preterism, futurism, and the Satan's Little Seasons ideas. Two things can't be true at the same time. So the Jesuits have created all of these things in order to separate Christians into different groups to once again unite them under Rome. And this brought up one of my central talking points of today, which is the National Conference of Churches. And the National Conference of Churches is a 21st century council that's made up of 38 Protestant denomination and Eastern Orthodox churches as full members, with other church bodies, including conservative Protestants and Roman Catholics, participating in its programs. The National Conference of Churches has published the English Revised Standard Version of the Bible in 1952, the New Revised Standard Version in 1989, and its recent update, the New Revised Standard Updated Version in 2021. Meaning, even though you think you might be reading a Protestant Bible, your Bible might have been even written by Jesuits. So that's something important to remember, is that, again, they're all working together towards the same goals. And, just like Robert Montague being a, secret Jesuit, Helena Blavatsky, who was the co-founder of the Theosophical Society and a notorious occultist, she even accused the Jesuits of being spies and having subversive people in the occult world. She accused Jesuits of infiltrating Freemasonry and other societies and using these organizations for their own political and religious agendas. So I think that that's really interesting that you brought up Robert Montague, because, even Helena Blavatsky believed that there were Jesuit operatives in the occult world. So, my biggest thing is with, we can clearly see that the Pope has their hands so deep into so many different parts of our society, whether it's the National Conference of Churches, whether it's, regimes like Nazi Germany or Mussolini's Italy or Castro's Cuba, or even today's America and the Pentagon, which, again, like you said, the first bricks of the Pentagon were laid on 9/11. I think it's also interesting that one of the men that belonged to the Farnese family died on 9/11, and his death sparked the fall of the Farnese family, who lived at the building shaped like the Pentagon. And of course, we all know the Pentagon also was attacked on 9/11, which was one of the darkest days in American history. The United States government, unfortunately, is still controlled by these people. And my question would be to Trump's administration that is almost completely Catholic. My question would be to Trump's Catholic wife. My question would be to the, chief joint chairman of the chiefs of staff at the Pentagon, who's also Catholic. My question would be to all of those people was if the Pope was to launch a crusade on America tomorrow, hypothetically, to convert America to Catholicism, are you going to support the Pope, or are you going to defend the sovereignty of the United States? I think that's the question we honestly need to be asking, because history will tell us, in the cases of Nazi Germany, in the cases of Castro's Cuba, in the case of Mussolini's Italy, these places were heavily controlled by the Pope through dictators that had overwhelmingly Catholic governments that were also heavily involved in the occult. And that's why it's so interesting that Nazi Germany is brought up, because Nazi Germany was not only super Catholic, but the founders of the Nazi Party were also members of the Thule Society, which is extremely occult. And the members of the German party, the German Workers' Party that became the Nazi Party, were all members of the Thule Society. And so when you start to understand that not only were they Catholic, not only were they leading regimes, but they were also occultists, it makes a lot of sense about our current government. We're led by people who are acting like dictators. They're doing occult things with people like Jeffrey Epstein, but yet they're all Catholic. History will tell you that this has been happening for centuries. We just need to put the pieces together and put these people behind bars before it's too late.
Amen. Amen. Nathan, the number of people in the Trump administration, there's all kinds of memes out there that Donald Trump is owned by the Jewish lobby. Donald Trump's going to war with Iran because he is a puppet of Netanyahu. Absolutely patently absurd. John Daniel Cain is the Air Force general who is the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, a very devout Roman Catholic. I have a long list from Christy Garden-Nome, no longer the Secretary of Homeland Security, that she was Roman Catholic, indoctrinated at Mount Mary University. Lori Chavez DeReamer, I had her unconfirmed Secretary of Labor, Catholic. Sean Duffy, Secretary of Transportation, Catholic. Paul Guaglione, Assistant Secretary of State for Legislative Affairs, Catholic. Alina Habba, Counselor to the President, self-described Roman Catholic. Hegseth, of course. Hegseth, now the Secretary of War, with his Knight of the Holy Sepulchre tattoo on his chest. Are you kidding me? Thomas Homan, White House border czar, Catholic. Linda McMahon, of course, the wife of Vince McMahon, Baptist, convert to Roman Catholicism. Marco Rubio, with his background in Mormonism and Catholicism. J.D. Vance, of course, the vice president, Catholic. We go back to Trump Part 1, 1.0, Stephen Kevin Bannon, the Jesuit-trained, devout Roman Catholic Goldman Sachs guy that put him in office. I've got like 40 other names from his original administration, and I don't want to tell you, you got to keep going with Trump.
And Johnny, they're all Jewish, or are they all...
Right.
What religion are they again?
Yeah, they're all Catholic, pal. They're all
Catholic.
And then if you add, Max, if you add Jews who are Jesuit or Catholic trained, it's mind-blowing.
Well, and have you added the Episcopal Church, and have you added the so-called Orthodox Church, which, as we've gone over, the Orthodox Church is heavily involved with the Catholic Church, and then the Episcopal Church claims apostolic authority and apostolic succession from the Catholic Church. So if you add in those guys, I mean, it's really hard to, like you said, it's hard to argue with. It's a laundry list of people.
Listen, so many examples, Max, so many examples. The Episcopal Church is, of course, the American Anglican Church, and the Anglican Church is nothing more than Catholic light being ripped from the Catholic Church by Henry VIII, and he made himself Pope. That's all it is. John Knox, the powerful Christian evangelizer told him to his face, there's nothing different. There's no difference between your new church and the old church. And
well, they're heavily Freemasons too. There was an Anglican bishop who just recently did a mass at the Vatican, and the Vatican had to come out and apologize because they found out that not only is he an Anglican bishop, but he's also a Freemason, and they had to come out and say, we didn't know he was going to do this. Meanwhile, he's at the Vatican, he's an Anglican bishop, and he's a Freemason, and he's doing a mass at the Vatican. I mean, this is unbelievable stuff.
I think it's worth mentioning that when we say Episcopal, we've got guys like Tucker Carlson and Everett Howard Hunt with their ties to the CIA, thoroughly owned and dominated by the Catholic Church. And of course, Everett Howard Hunt was eventually brought into the Catholic fold by oh my goodness, it'll come back to me. Anyway, Nathan, as I'm pulling up the guy that converted to E. Howard Hunt to Catholicism, go ahead and jump in. Your doggy okay? Don't freak me out saying that you had to take care of your doggy.
Yeah, my dog's fine. She was
Okay.
just whining for.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I highly recommend joining the subreddit Jesuit World Order 2. There was a subreddit called Jesuit World Order, but apparently the owner of the subreddit disappeared. So we had to create a Jesuit World Order 2. And I forgot who posted it, but someone posted something about a location where Tucker Carlson performed one of his interviews, and it's like undeniably a Freemasonic lodge. So these people are not like, they're not your saviors. These people, they're all in on it. It's one big Jesuit theater which operates through all these different fronts. In my opinion, if someone's getting like so many, like tons of views, and everyone getting tons of views, they're all speaking the same talking points, and they're all ignoring the Jesuits. And anyone who has done the research will know you cannot ignore the role of the Jesuits. So that, like I said, that tells you everything you need to know. But and it goes back to what Tudor said, like, the Bible clearly says that in the end times, most people are going to be fooled. So the fact that this is catching on, like this is going viral and this is going mainstream, that should tell you that this is part of the deception, right? And the whole point of it, like we said before, is like to get people more and more angry at the Jews, so that the more angry people are, the more easily they can hand you a solution. People are just going to take it and they're not going to question it, right? And emotions is the one way that these people manipulate the masses. And I just don't understand how people don't see what's happening. Everyone is getting so angry, everyone's getting so emotional, but people can't connect that to, hold on, maybe we're being manipulated into some sort of like solution that they want, which is, again, the Hegelian dialectic that they've been doing ever since the dawn of mankind to rule over us. People can't take that one step further and apply it to the current situation and be like, okay, they're prepping us for the solution that they prepared. And this is the fact that it's going mainstream on like Instagram and like YouTube. These are the same platforms that used to ban you if you said anything about, say, like the COVID vaccine. Sorry, you have to say if you said anything negative about like the vaccine, or just like 2 years ago, if you said anything about, if you said even like 1% of what is allowed to be said now, like you would get banned. So really, and like X and Instagram, like around the same time, they just relaxed their restrictions on free speech to allow this. People don't think that's weird. Like, just like 5 years ago, this was all unheard of. And now like all these mainstream talking points, they're pushing it and it's allowed. And I would even go as far as to say that, like the algorithm, it almost seems like the algorithm gives you a boost if you do that Jew baiting. It's kind of strange. It's almost the exact opposite of what you would expect from like Instagram. But, I don't know. I feel like for those with eyes to see, it's like, it's kind of obvious what's going on. It's all like one gigantic psyop. Like, no, Satan's plans is not going to be unveiled on like a mainstream understanding. And
Tudor, what Nathan is saying is so brilliant. It absolutely throws in the face of anyone that complains the Jews run it all. How can the Jews run it all when you go on any of these platforms, Instagram or Twitter, and you see Jews? I want to back up with my notes as you guys are talking. They're so brilliant. I'm taking notes on the background just as Max is. Luther brilliantly connected Babylon to Rome. The vicarious filii Dei, of course, Latin, just like Hebrew, has numeric values in some of its letters, and the vicarious filii Dei, if you take the numeric values out of that from Latin and put it together, you get 666. By the way, the guy that converted Everett Howard Hunt from Episcopalianism to Catholicism was, of course, William Francis Buckley Jr., the skull and bones Roman Catholic from Yale, CIA, that founded National Review, the original baiter of conservatardia. Oh, if you want to contrast to the far left, you follow William Francis Buckley. If you ever watch him, he never sat up. He always sat all hunched over in his seat with his pen in his mouth. William Francis, oh, how the Catholics do love to give their little boys the androgynous middle name of the co-founder of the Jesuits. Emotion, just like Nathan was saying, love you, give you a kiss on the cheek, no homo. The emotion kills critical thought. Emotion kills critical thought. And as soon as you froth people up, either for or against, love the Jews, hate the Jews, love the Jews, they win. They win. Did you know that Napoleon Bonaparte had a proclamation all ready to go on April 19, 1799 in Egypt that he was going to announce the founding of the new Jewish homeland? And unfortunately for him, maybe fortunately for us, that he was not able to conduct a successful siege at Acre. Do Jews run along? Obviously not. Rothschild, if you type into Google that was changed his birthday in 2006 to the 27th of September, the birthday of the Jesuits, to honor Jews? No, to honor the Jesuits. Who runs the world from behind the scenes? Rothschild, Red Shield. Frederick Tupper Saucy brilliantly putting it. Who wears the red shield in battle? The shield of the Roman military, to have the patties but shoved up front. Emmanuel Josephson, brilliant author, said, listen, the Catholic Church needed plausible deniability on usury that was created by Roman Catholic Knights and the Templars. They needed patsies, so they put Jewish bankers to manage their millions. Tudor, any of that?
Yeah, it's so much. If you look at church history, I mean, even just the first 1,000 years, even 1,500 years, the Jews were a ragtag people that were hated by Christendom. They were put in ghettos by Rome. People knew that these people were doing nefarious things, and there was nobody ever thought that the Jews would come back to their own nation. Nobody thought that they would rebuild a temple and start offering sacrifices again. I mean, absolutely nobody thought such things, and let alone this whole narrative that that Max and Nathan both have touched on, which is that the Catholic Church loves to play the idea. I've seen a lot of people talk about this, that, oh, the Jews infiltrated the church, and that's why there's all these bad things, because it's been infiltrated. It's like, well, you tell me. Rome was the sword over people's heads. At what point would Jews have ever infiltrated Rome? Do you think any of that Roman nobility would have allowed a Jew into any form of power over them? No way. Not in a million years. The Jews were court Jews, Hofjuden, that were basically papal clowns doing their little things, and the bankers and everything else that you guys have talked about. The Templars had all the money, and they had workings and dealings with the Jews to basically set up their banking systems, and they were very friendly with the Jews. Napoleon, a lot of people don't realize that Zionism not only originated in the Jesuits theologically with the eschatology changes, but physically, historically, it really originates with Napoleon, because Napoleon's mission was to liberate the Jews. He was very, very pro-Jew. He liberated the Jews. He created this idea that, look, I'm your savior. The Jews throughout history have always had Messiah figures that they've wanted since the very beginning, since the very end. They've always looked at other people other than Christ for a Messiah, but they were never successful. They were never successful because they were a ragtag group of revolutionaries, antichrists. And so the Jesuits knew that. And they said, this is what you want, huh? You want a savior, don't you? You want somebody to come and save you. So here, we're going to give you one. Here's Napoleon, your fleshly, carnal savior, your liberator that's going to give you your promised kingdom and all these things that the Jews just froth at the mouth for. And they went for it. And of course, you see the inscriptions of that time where you have Napoleon standing on a rock and pointing this way, and there's like a sun, like this radiating pyramid with an eye that's radiating light, and the Jews are being, basically initiated into this worldview. And so he was planning to do this whole Third Temple narrative like 200 years ago, and like you said, it didn't pan out, and that resulted in the same thing that you said, Giovanni, which is love the Jews, hate the Jews in Europe. You had countries that were, as a result of Napoleon's efforts, very pro-Jew. Then other countries are like, no, we don't want to do anything for the Jews. They're Jews, And so you have this tit for tat, tit for tat, and in that tit for tat, you have people like Moses Hess, what's his name, Theodor Herzl, all the people that people know by now. But of course, they only go back 100 years or 150 years. They don't go before that to see how these people came up in these cultures. And even so, Theodor Herzl was wanting to convert the Jews to Catholicism. So, in my Jews video on YouTube, which is now like almost 2 million views, which is just crazy, a lot of people comment like, no, Pope Pius, I forget which one it was at the time, but anyway, the one that Theodore met with, and the Pope was like, we are not going to honor the Jews because they did not honor Christ. Like, oh, yes, so noble. And it's like, okay, let's learn a little bit of history. The Jesuits assassinated Pope Clement, whatever, with the French Revolution. They poisoned him because he went against them and sided with the monarchs. And then they were reinstated, what, like 20 years later or something, 30 years later. So that tells you that the papal authority says, okay, we're going to play ball. I'm not going to go against you. We're going to play this together. Otherwise I'm going to get poisoned. And he knew that. So on one side, you've got a thread of the Catholic Church that's actively promoting Zionism in the world and bringing it into being. On the other hand, you've got another thread that says, oh no, we reject Zionism. We are, we are standing against that because Jews killed Christ and they've denied Christ. So you tell me who is actually telling the truth there? Well, this is a ruse. This is just Jesuit theater that the Pope is denying of course he's going to deny the Zionists, because that's his job, is to be the shining light that, speaks the quote unquote truth. But, in the shadows, his henchmen are coming from the other side and causing it to be. Another thing too that people will realize is that the Knights of Malta were connected with both starting the CIA through Bill Donovan and other assets, and also training the Mossad. I believe Reinhard Gehlen was the Knight of Malta member that was intimately involved with training the original units of the Mossad. So both of these have their roots. You've got two sides. You've got the dark and the light, the sides that have basically created all the shenanigans of the last 100 years with the revolutions and drug cartels and everything else. These two sides are both one piece in the pod. The cartels in Mexico, all those guys are like rabid, frothing at the mouth Catholics. So it's all just Catholics in action when you boil down to it.
Absolutely brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. Theodore Herzl had his audience with Giuseppe Sarto, aka Pius number 10. And
right.
The official record is that he said, listen, I'm not against you, but I can't be for you because you don't love Jesus like I love Jesus. Meanwhile, he's giving a little pat on the behind. You go, girl, you go. Absolutely legit. There's so much of Zionism, Max, you're up next. There's so much of Zionism that from Napoleon Bonaparte all the way through to today that is secretly run by the Catholic Church. We can hit up to Mazzini and Pike, and I've got a source that Mazzini was actually a Jesuit priest, and their letters back and forth. And let's see here. Rome wants two choices. Let's see here. I've got so many notes that it's my head is spinning on this, but I'm trying to read through them real quickly. Zev Jabotinsky, of course, he had his inspiration in Rome, the godfather of Zionism. We have also my notes previously, Sabbatai Zevi and his proselyte Jacob Frank, the ridiculous idea that they created a messianic, powerful Jewish undercurrent that rules the world today. Dude, you kidding? Okay, if they're messianic figures, they're dead. I've got a messianic figure. I can't even say it right. I've got a messianic figure that isn't in his tomb. So, Max, I'm going to shut up and pull my notes together and let you jump in.
No, you're great. You're great. And thank you for having me. I love being a part of this. I just think it's interesting that we're talking about a temple. We're talking about a sacrifice. I just saw some news recently about a bull, a red heifer, not being pure enough. So they sacrificed it in the fire. And immediately it made me think of the cult of Mithras. And for those of you who don't know, the cult of Mithras was based on Quirinal Hill in Rome. And the palace on Quirinal Hill has served as the residence for 30 popes, 12 presidents of Italy, and 4 kings of the Italian Republic. So they celebrated the birth of their false god on December 25th. They called their priest father. They had 7 grades of initiation, just like the Catholic Church. From layman to pope, there's 7 degrees of initiation, just like the cult of Mithras. And I just think it's interesting that they're casting all of the blame on Israel when the nation state of Israel itself has been controlled even since, King Herod. And, King Herod the Great was the Roman appointed client king of Judea, who, if you don't know, Herod was the guy who tried to kill Jesus right after he was born. So it's really interesting to me that King Herod, who built the temple, was a Roman client king, meaning he was controlled by Rome. The Latin kingdom of Jerusalem was also controlled by Rome. And, when there was a vacancy, by law, the Pope would appoint the new Latin king of Jerusalem. And, we have the Rothschilds who created modern Israel, and the Rothschilds are the Pope's bankers, folks. And unfortunately, the Pope still controls Israel and Jerusalem to this day, because the Rothschilds, who created Israel, again, are the Pope's bankers. And just recently in 1974, Princess Olympia Aldobrandini married David de Rothschild, who's the head of Rothschild Group. He's the president of Rothschild Group, and his son, who's also the son of Princess Olympia Aldobrandini, he is the head of Rothschild and Company. So what's important there is the Aldobrandinis are members of the Black nobility. They also trace their DNA all the way back to Iran, according to Dr. Lauren Moret at the University of California, Davis, which is interesting that Israel's going to war with Iran when the Rothschilds are married to the Aldobrandinis, and the Aldobrandinis are from Iran. Perhaps they're gaining, prestige over their former lands. I also think it's interesting, like I said, the Rothschilds still control Israel today. And the Vatican has been no secret. They have, not only supported the Rothschilds, created the Rothschilds. For people who don't know, they weren't originally called the Rothschilds. They actually changed their name to Rothschild to describe the shield of the Roman Empire that they hung above their bank in Germany. So the Vatican also has the greatest wealth of Kabbalistic manuscripts. And they also had the Talmud dedicated to Pope Leo X, who's also a member of the Black nobility. So when they tell you that Israel and Rome have been at war, in reality, Israel's controlled Rome for generations. And like the other gentlemen have so articulately described, they particularly get you to choose a team. And just like Albert Pike and the possible Catholic priest says in their letter, they make you choose a team. Are you going to be an Islamic, pro-Islamic? Or are you going to be pro-Israel? Because in the end, World War III is going to be pinning the Muslims against the Zionists. And as we know, my friends, not only are the Zionists controlled by the Catholic Church, as I just said, but Muhammad, unfortunately, not only was he a pedophile, but he also worked closely with an Arian priest. And the Arians were very influential in not only the Orthodox Church, but in Catholic Church history as well, which is interesting because Hitler called his race the Aryan race, and he said that they came from the star of Aldebaran, and the word Aldobrandini comes from Aldebaran. It's very interesting.
Brilliant. Let me pull up real quick my source on this. look, you make what you want. It's an obscure book, Swarms of Locusts by Michael Bunker, published by Refugio in 2002, where he calls Giuseppe Mazzini a Jesuit. There are countless volumes of conspiracy literature exposing the Freemasons, but few expose the fact that Albert Pike's spiritual advisor and second in command was an initiate Italian Roman Catholic Jesuit priest named Giuseppe Mazzini. It seems that wherever we lift up the rock of heresy, we find the serpents of Jesuitism. So take that for what it's worth. I know I asked Gemini.
He was one of the first leaders of the KKK. For people who don't know. And Robert Byrd later converted.
Well, Albert Pike was not Mazzini. Yeah. Robert Byrd.
Pike.
And listen, that's a crossover. If you want to get into the blood of children, the blood and tears of children, and the Catholic Church preying upon the children of, oh my goodness, Robert Byrd, named by Kathy O'Brien as one of her chief abusers and handlers, we could go off into a very, very dark way. At the bare minimum, look, throughout history, the Catholic Church has done horrible things as gateways to evil and to power. For some reason, it keeps coming up in my mind of Catherine de' Medici, the Italian queen of France, and her black mass that was conducted for her barren womb. If you give me a second, I'll pull up the name of the supposed renegade Catholic priest that did that for her. They bled out a young boy, and surprise, surprise, she was able to conceive 10 more times after that. And I always use the analogy of the very Roman Catholic comic book movie Van Helsing, of the little vampirettes. Babies, when all of a sudden they pop out too early because they weren't right. There's just something wasn't right, and they're flying around. That poop, and that's kind of what happened to poor Catherine de' Medici's children. They all died young. Real quick, I don't like making statements and not backing it up. I was talking about Zionism being created by the Roman Catholic Church. Just real quick on some of my notes. 1917, was it the Rothschilds that pushed the Balfour Declaration? 11 December 1917, a mere 2 days after the above. I was mentioning a letter. British General Edmund Allenby entered Jerusalem and triumphantly through the Jaffa Gate became an occupied territory, and on this historic occasion reportedly said, "The wars of the Crusades are now complete." Well, why would he do that? Just a year prior, the British signed with the French an accord that would have created Palestine, given Palestine to the Jews, known as Sykes-Picot. Representatives from both nations had one thing in common. Sir Tatton Benevuto Mark Sykes, a devout Roman Catholic trained by Benedictines at Jesus College, Cambridge, and the Jesuits of Beaumont College at Windsor. Francois Marie Francis Mary Georges Picot was also a pampered aristocrat, French Catholic lawyer from a family of French Catholic lawyers, so devout they named their little son Francis Mary. Prior to meeting his British Catholic brother, carving up Palestine for Rome, Georges Picot was stationed in Beirut, which one of the superior generals, Peter Hans Kulvenbach, knows very well. The French evacuated the consulate there, and Georges Picot had the unfortunate slip of mind to leave behind the list of Lebanese and Syrian patriots who had sought asylum from the Ottoman tyranny. They were gathered up, tortured, horribly slaughtered. Furious, he hunted down, the first that landed was Ahmed Jamal Pasha, commander of the Turkish army. Furious, he hunted down 33 defectors and had them brutally tortured and finally hung in Alberge, the Martyrs' Square. 1923, in an effort to create a force to defend the Jewish pilgrims in Palestine, Jabotinsky founded his Bechar Youth Movement. 1934, Benito Mussolini gave Jabotinsky access to his Civitavecchia naval base north of Rome for Bechar to train for his training academy. 35, Mussolini personally endorsed Bechar, stating that for Zionism to succeed, you need to have a Jewish state with a Jewish flag and a Jewish language. Why did Benito Mussolini care? The person who really understands this is your fascist Jabotinsky. That's Benito Mussolini quote in 35. 2002 article, Will Israel Outlive Its Fascists? The Executive Intelligence Review, Stephen Meyer wrote, Il Duce gave his personal endorsement to the project in 36 when he visited Civitavecchia and reviewed the Bechar cadre force. This is a fascinating juxtaposition because devout Roman Catholic Benito Mussolini's confessor was a rabidly anti-Semitic Jesuit priest named Pietro Tacchi Venturi. 6 years earlier, the king, Victor Emmanuel III, made the Vatican a sovereign city-state with his prime minister, Benito Mussolini, who hand-delivered the 1929 Lateran Treaty to Ambrogio Pius XI Ratti. I've got many, many more lines. I don't want to monopolize the time there on how Zionism is a Roman Catholic ploy. I'm going to shut up there. Oh, wait, one real quick in relation to the sovereignty, the issue where we're talking, I think it was Max, talking about Herod. This came up for me when I was talking to Gemini in relation to the prophecy and the line of the tribe of Judah, Genesis 49, 9 through 10. Jacob identifies Judah explicitly as a lion's whelp. The blessing, the scepter shall not depart from Judah until Shiloh comes. This is the king imagery. Matthew, the most Jewish gospel, focusing on the king and his kingdom. It's no coincidence the line of tribe of Judah is the banner of the east, the direction of the rising of the sun, and the entrance of the tabernacle, and its fulfillment. I've got to scroll ahead because I was really going off there with Gemini. Scroll ahead, and it was timed perfectly. Jesus Christ was 12 years old when Israel lost its self-governance. That's the age of accountability, the bar mitzvah age. Absolutely tingles. It gives me tingles to discuss that, the fulfillment of Scripture. Nathan, and then back to Tudor. Anything on your plate?
Yeah, so I mean, what you said about like Rome being behind Zionism is excellent, and they're also behind all these other movements too. Like we briefly touched on, like communism as well. And what was Rome's solution that they handed to you for the solution to communism? It was Nazism, and Rome is also behind Nazism as well. You know, like I have a citation that shows that this practice of identifying Jews with yellow-colored signs, this is actually like a Roman practice. This comes from Rome, and I'm going to cite the book Vatican Ratline by Mori. She basically calls the Nazis are basically the army of Rome. And if you just put two and two together and like look at what's happening today and look at what happened in the past and look at who are all the mainstream talking points, realize they're all Catholics. Like just put two and two together. Like history is repeating itself. They're trying to recreate Rome's army, and people are going to buy into it. Last time it was communism, right? The Jewish communism was the threat. Now we got to create the solution, which was Nazism. And now the threat is Zionism, and the solution they're going to hand to you is something like Nazism. I don't know if it's going to be called Nazism, but you know, the insider Smalley, who worked with the Jesuit order, reportedly, she predicted this all in her book, that the goal for the New World Order is for there to be the rise of a new, quote, Fourth Reich. So I don't know, just put two and two together. I think, you know, it's playing out perfectly. And, you know, that's basically what's happening. It's Rome operating through different fronts, because, you know, people tend to ignore, people keep saying Revelation 2:9, Revelation 3:9, synagogue of Satan, but they keep ignoring Mystery Babylon is Rome. And, you know, it's obviously Rome if you connect the dots. Babylon was a code name for Rome in those times. People try to equate Mystery Babylon to all these other things, which in my opinion doesn't make as much sense. Is, you know, Rome is like the scholarly opinion that is the identity of Mystery Babylon, but people tend to ignore that. So
absolutely brilliantly put, Nathan. Tudor, listen, who was John writing to? John was writing to Jews. He was writing to Jews who became Christians. He was talking about the apostate Jews who refused to accept their destiny in Christ. Real quick, I'm going to go back and mention just so many more of these. Franz Ritter von Epp, the Nazi general, Munich, Bavarian politician, mass murderer of Jews, invisible Catholic. Franz von Papen, the devout Roman Catholic who bankrolled the Third Reich. Fritz Thyssen, the Catholic businessman who got a pass on the Jew-hating. He was a Nazi. He was a Knight of Malta. Hans Asperger, the Roman Catholic University of Vienna Nazi eugenics child mass murderer, the namesake of Asperger syndrome. Heinrich Himmler, I've got a source on Himmler being a colored Jesuit, not just having a Jesuit uncle. Heinrich Mayer, Roman Catholic priest, hero of the Austrian resistance, was killed conveniently at the end of the war. Heinrich Müller of the Gestapo, raised Catholic in Munich, director of the Gestapo starting on 27 September 1939. Herbert Kappler, SS commander in Rome, slaughtered 335 civilians, got life imprisonment, and escaped to West Germany, was a Catholic convert. Hermann Muckermann, Hitler's ex-Jesuit eugenicist. I'm going to stop there. I'm going to touch on Munich real quick. Everything came out of Munich. Munich, Ingolstadt, a Jesuit stronghold. Alfred Jodl, nephew of University of Vienna psychologist. Friedrich Jodl, Munich military school, raised but rejected Catholicism. Supposedly, of course, Bernard Stempfel, also out of Munich. Emmy Goering, Goering's second wife, died in Munich. Ernst Poner, Munich police chief, pro-Nazi, anti-Jew, dead at 55 from a car accident. His funeral was the very first showing for the SA. Ernst Röhm, the homosexual leader of the Brown Shirts, Munich, extreme socialist, long lives. Oh, by the way, did you know that Nazis were socialists? They're not right-wing in any way, shape, or form. Eva Braun, born Roman Catholic, double-dipped, convent, educated out of Munich. Franz Ritter von Epp, I just mentioned him. Heinrich Himmler, also a Munich boy, I think an altar boy out of Munich. I wouldn't be surprised. Heinz Müller followed daddy as a Munich police officer. Joachim Peiper, the Nazi mass murderer, escaped execution. Munich Roman Catholic burial. Johann Adam Weishaupt, born in Bavaria, the Jesuit behind so many of these movements. Joseph Mengele, raised Roman Catholic, trained in Munich. Wilhelm Frick, another Bavarian, Munich Nazi, Ingolstadt University. I'm going to shut up there and let Tudor jump in.
Yeah, the Rome loves its crusades, and I think as I'm watching the things unfold with Iran, I think this is the final crusade. And the final crusade, by the way, send me that resource that you had with that general walking through the Jaffa Gate and saying that the crusades are over. I would love to.
Yeah, it's Al Jazeera. I'll send it to you. It's Al Jazeera.
Yeah,
you got
it. That's great because it's exactly what I've been coming to the conclusion also, is that this is really the final crusade, in the sense that in one fell swoop, they are annihilating Protestantism, extremist Islam, and Zionism all in one fell swoop in this conflict. Because what's happening is, if you look at each of these three, which are the enemy of Rome that need to be destroyed and integrated, each of these three is being implicated in this conflict. You have Zionism, obviously, and the state of Israel is going to collapse. It's going to be reintegrated. It's going to be, dissolved in some sense, because Zionism is being exposed. The people, even the Jews themselves, there's a civil war among the Jews between the Zionist Jews and the Orthodox Jews, who don't want to be, the object of hatred, of the people's hatred because of the Zionists. So there's a big conflict there. Then you have Islam, which obviously, there's Sunni and Shia, and they're both being rattled up. I forget which one is the one that's more fundamentalist. Is it Sunni? Is it Sunni Muslims that think that they're traced back to Muhammad, or is it Shia? I forget. I know one of those is more ecumenical than the other, and so they're getting rid of the extremists in that regard, so that the ones that are left over between both of these groups are much more susceptible to false signs and wonders, culture shaping, prosperity, peace deals, whatever that's going to happen. And then, of course, in the process, you've got the complete and utter destruction of whatever was left of Protestantism, with all of the collapse of Zionism that's happening. All of these pastors that have been totally implicated by Israel and their Judaizing connections and their Judaizing eschatology that are now completely being totally discredited. Of course, especially by the Catholic heroes that are now coming to the surface, like Carrie Prejean Bowler and Joe Kent and all these people that are champions of the people. They're such patriots for America. Catholic, the Catholics are the true patriots. This is what's being preached to the masses. And of course, in the process, people are doing what? They're leaving Protestantism. They're going towards Orthodoxy because it's masculine and strong, and we don't deal with that woke crap. And they're going back to Catholicism and traditional values. Gen Z is more religious than all the other generations before it, at least in the last 3 or 4. So it's a really phenomenal thing to see this final crusade play out, which is this papal crusade in the Middle East. They've always wanted to conquer the Middle East, and they're going to be successful. They have to be, in order for the world to marvel after the beast. These people have to be reintegrated, reorganized. I think that they will probably install some kind of monarchy in Iran. I don't know what they'll do, but at the end of the day, they have to restructure that whole area so that it is ready for a new frame of thought. There has to be peace, there has to be prosperity, there has to be ecumenism, that has to be that has to be the thing. And so they're destroying everything so that they can integrate everything in the process. All of these things are coming together in a very brilliantly evil way, so to speak.
Yeah, listen, we already have so many sources on the interplay and the manipulation of Islam from the Catholic Church, and it's not just with Alberto Rivera. I've got a whole series on, and I'll pull that up in a little bit. It's technically, I guess, you call the Shia would be a little bit more fundamentalist, and I had to look that up myself. They believe after Muhammad's death, the leadership should have passed directly to his cousin and son-in-law Ali ibn Abi Talib. They are more fundamentalist. Max, I can't believe we only have a half hour left. This flew by. Max, jump in, and I'll pull up my notes on the Catholic manipulation of Islam. And then Nathan.
Yeah, Alberto Rivera talks a lot about that. And I just think it's interesting that the Shah of Iran has met with the Pope on numerous occasions. And of course, the, President and Prime Minister of Israel during different governments have also met with the Pope. So what do these two warring nations have in common with each other? The Pope. And what do the nations that are assisting them have in common with each other? They're being controlled by the Pope. And so that's why I think it's so interesting that, like Tudor said, you're watching the final crusade play out, but what's the goal here? The goal is to eliminate Protestantism. The goal is to unite everyone under Catholicism and to, hopefully bring, Muslims and Jews into some sort of ecumenical dialogue with Catholics, kind of like Robert Barron said to Ben Shapiro. I find it so ironic that, Catholics are constantly against the idea of dialogue with, people like, Ben Shapiro, especially, more traditional Catholics like Nick Fuentes. But in reality, if you look it up, any good, Catholic researcher that's watching this should look up Ben Shapiro's interview with Bishop Robert Barron, and he was my bishop of my archdiocese. And he actually became a cardinal, and he told Ben Shapiro on video that as long as he obeys the 613 commandments, that he doesn't necessarily need Jesus to be saved. So I think that is kind of the end game here. As long as you submit to Rome, you don't really need Jesus as long as you kiss the ring. You just gotta kiss the ring. You could be a Fatimite. You can walk around a giant Saturn cube if you want. You can light your menorah, but as long as you light your menorah with the Pope, and as long as the Shah of Iran continues to meet with the Pope, everything will be okay. That's what I see happening. It's a one world religion coming underneath the control of Rome.
Wow.
It's unfortunate, but it's true.
Listen, I'm going to throw out real quick. I have pages, Nathan. I have pages on the Catholic influence of Islam. Muhammad ibn Abdullah ibn Abdel al-Muttalib, born in Mecca in 570, a young man. Muhammad was in the habit of entering a cave like Loyola in the nearby mountains of Jabal al-Nur. Every year, on one occasion, he was met by the angel Gabriel, who imparted to him visions that would eventually become the Quran. Striking similarities between Muhammad's cave experiences and Ignacio Lopez, aka Ignatius de Loyola. Muhammad and his monotheistic Quran unified pagan tribes all over the Middle East. It was a movement birthed in blood. The Hadith, collections of early Muslim scholars on Muhammad and the Quran. Muhammad al-Bukhari state that the Jewess poisoned the prophetess. A Jewess poisoned the prophet with a sheep delicacy, not having a chance to clearly name a successor. The movement split, the most following Muhammad's father-in-law, Abu Bakr, and some following Muhammad's son-in-law and cousin, Ali ibn Abi Talib, for Shia Islam. Ali's rivals waited for their opportunity, and then while he was prostrate in prayer, they viciously hacked him to death. Ali's son, Hussein, their child of Muhammad's daughter, Fatima, also met a tragic end. Let me skip ahead to the direct interference. Fatima, the three Portuguese children, Lucia Santos, and her cousins Jacinta and Francis Marto, had a Marian apparition in 13 May 1917 in Portugal. The three children claimed to have been visited by the Virgin Mary 6 times before October 1917. Poor Francis Marto died 2 years later at the age of 10. Jacinta died 3 years later at the age of 9. Lucia was sequestered into a convent. And so the essence of this secret message all came from the Catholic Church. I have more direct. Let's see here. Of course, Rivera says Augustinian missionaries were basis of operations to foment the new mythical Messiah, exactly as depicted in Roman Catholic Frank Herbert's story Dune, where the Bene Gesserit fomented the myths of the Lisan al-Gaib and the Kwisatz Haderach for the Fremen of Arrakis, and placed Paul Atreides in that role. Muhammad's first handler was his first wife, Khadija bint Khuwailid. Alberto Rivera claimed that she was a devoted Catholic, though there are both sources that deny and confirm this. His second handler was Khadija's cousin, Waraqwa, also a faithful Catholic. There are many similarities between Catholicism and Islam, between their influence, including monotheism, veneration of Mary, use of prayer beads, veneration of the Old Testament, and key figures. However, under Waraqwa's direction, Muhammad wrote that Abraham offered Ishmael as sacrifice. One more. There was another... Bahira, a Catholic monk named Bahira, also helped Muhammad finish the Quran. I'm going to shut up there unless you want me to go into, what was I going to mention? I'm going to shut up there and let Nathan jump in. I can't believe we're so close to 2 hours already. Nathan, go ahead. Anything that we've covered so far.
Yeah, I love how you cite Alberto Rivera. He's a wonderful source of information from an ex-Jesuit. And I mean, a lot of people try to discredit sorry, a lot of people try to discredit Rivera, but I mean, if you actually look into his claims, you'll see that a lot of his claims, they are backed up by independent research. Like, for example, Walter Veith does a wonderful expose on Islam and its connections to Catholicism. Alberto Rivera, one thing he also said that's very interesting, he talked about how he witnessed high-level Jesuits who were also Freemasons. And this is another thing that blocks a lot of people's perception, is that they think that the Catholic Church is completely separate from the Freemasons, or that they're opposed. But that's just their public facade, and this is something that's very common with the Catholic Church. If you look throughout history, their public persona is very different from what they engage in privately. And the Jesuits are heavily intertwined with Freemasonry, and I have a lot of citations that talk about how the Jesuits actually control Freemasonry. They infiltrated Freemasonry, essentially. And one thing that a lot of people also bring up is I feel like they have this idea that the Pope controls the Jesuits, but if you look through history, it's actually, I think evidence shows that it's actually the other way around. It's the Jesuits who actually control the Pope, and the Black Pope is actually the one who is pulling the strings and directing the White Pope, who is really just a public figurehead. And in fact, this is corroborated by the fact that Pope Clement XIV, after he disbanded the Jesuits literally assassinated that Pope. So I think that goes to show that the popes have to play ball with the Jesuit agenda, and it's actually the Jesuits who pull the strings. And once you get to that level of understanding, you're dangerously close to coming to the understanding that the Black Pope is the one that has the true power. So what they do is they throw one other they throw one other distraction at you, and that is the existence of a so-called gray Pope. And this is something that I see a lot of people talk about online. I personally don't think a gray Pope even exists. If you, in all the books that I've read through about the Jesuits, there is zero mention about the gray Pope, except the only place I could find mentions of gray popes is some unsubstantiated claims in random articles, and often it gets repeated on social media a lot, but I couldn't find any credible source that actually substantiates the existence of gray popes.
It's Pepe Orsini. Everybody knows that, Nathan. It's Pepe Orsini is the gray pope.
Can I just touch on that?
Absolute fraud, distraction. Go ahead, Max. Absolute fraud and distraction. Go ahead, Max.
Yeah, I think you're touching on something very important here, because he's called the Gray Pope. Part of the reason I think he's called the Gray Pope is because his family has so much control over the Catholic Church. And as many of you know that are on this call, the Black nobility created the Jesuits. So the Orsini family married into the Farnese family, who created the Jesuits. The Orsini family today are controlled by Pepe Orsini, which is hence why he's called the Gray Pope, not because he's got some throne in the Vatican, but from what I understand, it's a symbolic title of nobility. It's a title of nobility that doesn't hold any particular power. It's a symbolic title to represent how much power the Orsini family, who are members of the Black nobility, have over the Catholic Church, which is immense.
Let me hang on, Max. Max, hang on,
the
pal.
Jesuits.
Let me throw out that I won't put that much into it. That the Black nobility, the Medici, the Orsini, the Colonna, the Borgia, without the infrastructure of the Catholic Church, they are only small epaulettes, epicenters of power.
I 100% agree with that. I 100% agree with that. They're just the people that manipulate the power structures of the Catholic Church for an extended period of time. They've used it to manipulate and control people. So that's the only reason. It's not like I'm agreeing with you and Nathan 100%. I'm just saying that's why he's called that. It's not because he's the literal figurehead. And I agree with you that it's a distraction. He shouldn't be looked at. We need to be focusing on the white Pope and the Black Pope. I 100% agree with that. And the Jesuits, they not only created Freemasonry, but there's even a priest named Charles Murr who has come out and said that the Pope might have even been murdered by people in the Vatican who were Freemasons. So the Jesuits not only created the Freemasons, but then the Freemasons who were trained by the Jesuits rose up through the ranks of the church that created them and then killed the Pope in power. And he wrote a book on this. And I think he's a Jesuit plant. I think that you got to watch out for this guy. He works a lot with the Fatima Center, which goes in a lot to the so-called Marian apparitions that Johnny was just talking about. These are these false apparitions where these people have these metaphysical, visions of Mary, and they believe Mary appears to them and tells them to do crazy things. We have a shrine called the Nishida Shrine near us in Wisconsin, where this cult was actually excommunicated from the Catholic Church because these people were so crazy. But, the Jesuits not only control organizations like the Fatima Center, they not only control organizations like the Freemasons, but they actually have risen up through the ranks. And at the same time that the Orthodox Church was coming back together with the Catholic Church in Vatican II, according to Charles Murr, the entire Roman Curia was made up of Freemasons during Vatican II. And this is from a Catholic priest who has been a priest for 40 years. The only reason I bring him up is because people call us conspiracy theorists for saying that there's Catholic Freemasons. But in reality, here's a Jesuit-trained controlled opposition, member of the Fatima Center, and even he admits that the Catholic Church was controlled by Freemasons. And from his perspective, they've been infiltrated. But as we know, my friends, the Catholic Church has not been infiltrated. It's the opposite way around. The Catholic Church has infiltrated every corner of our society and, unfortunately, the society of the world. And the question is, what are men like us, good men of God, good men of the scriptures, followers of Jesus Christ, what are we going to do peacefully to change the way the world is? What are we going to do to educate the young people in our society? What are we going to do to change the tide of Catholicism and the tide of Orthodoxy? What are we going to do to change that tide towards the scriptures and towards Bible-believing Christianity? I think that's a question that we need to ask.
Tudor, absolutely. Well done. Well done. Tudor, Adolf Hitler was trained well. Anything but the Catholic Church. It's the Jews. It's the Masons. It's the communists. Real quick on my notes on Freemasonry. ISIS Unveiled, Volume 2. Blavatsky lamented that the puppet masters were all Jesuits, that the Jesuits controlled secret societies. That's pages 359 to 360. According to the official Freemasonic historian Albert Mackey, Encyclopedia of Freemasonry, Volume 1, the Jesuits created the first 26 degrees of Freemasonry, actually all, as far as I'm concerned, in 1688, the University of Claremont, in conjunction with the resurgence of ordained Jesuit James II, King of England. Both Mackey and Occult Theocracy author Edith Starr Miller acknowledged Jesuits used Freemasonry. As far as I'm concerned, if they didn't co-opt Freemasonry, they originated it as plausible deniability. Freemasonry, especially Scottish Rite, proudly claimed their lineage through the Templars. I've got pages and pages. I want to shut up and stop there and let you jump in as we round out to the last 15 minutes. Go ahead.
Yeah, the Freemasons are just another example of how these two threads of Rome and Judea have been intertwined by the devil through history, because the original Freemasons were operant Masons, which continued the esoteric understandings that are baked into architecture and various techniques and things. And those were Jews. The Jews that had gotten away from the dispersions were the ones that developed operant Freemasonry. They went to Europe and various places, and there's certainly many theories about what they did and how the nobles of Judea kind of mixed into that culture. But regardless, operant Masonry was Jewish, and then what you had was the esoteric side, which is the Knights Templar when they went to their crusades, and they corrupted themselves with Kabbalah and all these different philosophies, and they were basically burned at the stake. Obviously, a lot of them got away. They went to Switzerland. They went to Ireland or Scotland actually. Kilwinning, I believe, was the place where they supposedly married the operant Freemasons and created, which is speculative Masonry, which is more of a philosophy where you're not necessarily an actually trained builder, but you're building, so to speak, you're building things, you're using dialectics and building things, and you're building societies and building, projects. And so this became as early as, I don't know, like the 1200s or whatever it was when they did that. So ever since then, it's been a married pursuit. So you see the rites and the rituals of these people, they're very, very strange. They have like Judaizing things and high priestly robes, and it's very like Old Testament kind of stuff. And it's just very, to me, that just screams synagogue of Satan. Like if you're gonna talk about the synagogue of Satan, but you're gonna ignore all of these obvious things, like the Jesuits, who are named after Jesus, but yet they're accused of doing the most black magic in history by Helena Blavatsky, or the Freemasons, who are parading around with high priestly robes of Aaron, and yet they're believing in Lucifer at the top of the ranks. I don't see how that works, because all of these people are just duplicitous people. And to touch on the hierarchy at the top, I think, we're never going to fully understand all the shenanigans that the devil does, because they work in the shadows and they have all of these little ways to separate power. And of course, the devil himself is keeping all these people against each other with a knife at each other's throat, because the devil can't change the conscience. So he manipulates people with the carrot and the stick. So I would, I wouldn't, I don't care so much. As far as, I think it's important for people to understand that all roads lead to Rome. I think once you get that conclusion, the Bible does you a favor and just shines the light on the obvious manifestation where Satan is galvanizing and coalescing his world system, which is the papacy. So you have to watch the papacy in the world and what it's doing. Obviously, the Jesuits are the arm of the papacy. Now, to what degree the Jesuit general controls the papacy, I think the Pope is a puppet. But at the end of the day, what matters is watching these powers in the world and watching their constituents, like the Knights Templar, the various cardinals, because cardinals are not religious figures; they are political agents. So are bishops, so are archbishops, so are priests. Satan's kingdom has a dualistic nature, just like the synagogue of Satan. It has on the surface a exoteric nature, which is presenting it as a religion, but in fact the esoteric, the inside nature, is an empire. It's the fifth empire of Daniel 5. It's the little horn power. It's the continuation of Satan's schemes in the world, and that means that what you're dealing with is political agents in the world. These cardinals are supervisors of the Knights of Malta, Knights Templars, all these various fraternal organizations. It all comes back to this empirical way of viewing. And that's why when you look at Catholics infiltrating positions of power in the government, Thomas Jefferson and John Adams have famous exchanges between themselves talking about the dangers of the Jesuits infiltrating the USA and taking advantage of its weakness, which is that and which is also its greatness, which is the freedom of conscience and the tolerance of religion. And the Jesuits were going to take advantage of that, according to them, which is what they did. And they immigrated a bunch of Catholics here. Now you have a almost completely Catholic Supreme Court and cabinet and everything else. And if you understand all of this stuff, you realize that you cannot be a loyal Catholic and a patriot unless you're in the Vatican. That makes sense. But you cannot be a loyal Catholic and a patriot. Why? Because Catholicism is an empire with a God King that you must pledge your spiritual and bodily allegiance to. So if that's the case, if that is the above all things, where the King of Kings himself says, "Oh, I'm basically greater than all kings," right? Then you are dealing with political agents, and a Catholic cannot and should not hold office in any country other than the Vatican. And yet people don't see a problem with that, which of course is part of the deception.
It was actually illegal in America at one point. It was illegal for Catholics to hold office for exactly the reason.
That was before the Civil War, right?
I believe there were colonies, yes, before the Civil War.
I think some of that is actually just like Saucy said, that how the Jesuits suppressed themselves for sympathy. When you find out that Maryland, the colony founded by Catholics for Catholics, was one of the states that outlawed Catholics voting. Now, the genesis of that is that when Catholics vote, they're not going to vote for the best interest of the country. They're going to vote for whatever, just like the Scorsese movie that lampooned that. They're going to vote however their king with the pointy hat in Rome tells them to vote. So, yeah, Nathan, by the way, no coincidence that, see if I can get the bulk of this, the Jefferson Adams, no coincidence that both Jefferson and Adams would die on the 4th of July, almost as if they ascended or were killed, assassinated. I do not like the late resurrection of the Jesuits, said John Adams, May 6, 1816. He warned they would arrive in America as swarms in various disguises, printers, editors, and schoolmasters to subvert the purity of elections. He famously declared that if any group could merit eternal perdition on earth and in hell, it is that company of Loyola. By the way, the nickname of the Jesuits, the company, also the nickname of the CIA. Nathan, anything to round things out?
Yeah, I guess one thing that I've noticed is that social media is the most powerful tool for mind control. And in my opinion, it's been incredibly effective at mobilizing people for what I believe is going to be like, some sort of war or some conclusion or solution to what we're witnessing. And, I would just advise people to be very mindful of the information that they take in, especially if it's on social media, where like you're kind of like in a relaxed state where you're like prime for programming, and people just keep repeating the same things, and it's like emotionally charged. This is like a recipe for brainwashing, and then like all of a sudden when someone speaks up against what happens to be trending, like people are so like programmed that they can't like accept that it may not be the full truth. So I think my final like recommendation is just be very conscious of the information you're consuming, and try not to be emotionally manipulated, because that's the trick that the devil pulls on people and has been pulling on people since the beginning of time to manipulate the masses. Is they get them emotional, they get people to buy into these revolutions, divide and conquer, and the puppet masters stay hidden. So that, I guess that's my recommendation. Just try to be mindful of how you feel and like the information you're consuming, and because you got to take responsibility for your emotions and to make sure you're not being manipulated. So,
that's one of the reasons why I'm so absolutely thrilled to have you three guys in a stream together, because you guys are phenomenal researchers, journalists, and historians. And real quick, to backstory to bolster Nathan's point, LifeLog, the DARPA experiment in social networking, ended on 4 February 2004, the very same day that Jewish Mark Zuckerberg created Mega Fakebook. Yeah, right. If you believe that, I've got something else to sell you. These are the guys right here that give you names, places, and dates. Tudor and any final thoughts, and then Max, and then Nathan, final thoughts.
Final thoughts is, if it's obvious and everyone's picking up on it, then you haven't picked up on it. If it's obvious and if everyone's got it,
right,
it's not the thing.
Right. Max, anything to round things out, pal?
Yeah, you have to have eyes to see and ears to hear. It's what the scriptures say. It's just what Tudor just said. You have to have eyes to see and ears to hear, but not worldly eyes and not worldly ears. Christ's eyes and Christ's ears. The Bible says my people perish for lack of knowledge. So we have to test the spirits and evaluate the information that we're getting, especially on social media. like Nathan said, and have no fellowship with the unfruitful works of darkness, my friends, but rather expose them. And that's what we're here to do today, is expose Rome and expose how they're controlling people. And thank you, Johnny, for having me.
Amen. Love you, Max. Appreciate you. Nathan, anything
Love
to
you
close
guys.
us out, pal?
Yeah, I guess I totally agree with what you guys said. This is like a lot of people think the Hegelian dialectic is just one layer, but what Rome has done, they kind of like layer on Hegelian dialectics on Hegelian dialectics. So once you make it past one layer, there's like another layer, and it's basically what I believe is happening is a manufactured awakening, and this is being facilitated by social media and brainwashing. And yeah, I mean, this isn't to say that Jews don't play a role; they definitely play a role, but it's not the full story, and they're only giving you part of the story because it's part of their controlled demolition to lead you in to the new world order. And as you guys said, if you have eyes to see and ears to hear, it's very in your face, but it's up to you to pay attention to signs and do your research.
Amen. Nathan, I would love to see this corrupt system come tumbling down like a big house of cards. I would love to. I'd love to be part of it. The problem is there are no efforts. Any efforts to tear down the system all seem to be just like it's always been by the same people that made the system, and their results are going to make it much worse. You can say that about any communist revolution. It was a corrupt feudal society they overthrew, and instead they got something much, much worse in the bargain, and that's what the Jesuits do. Guys, you are the best. Stick around after I close out the show. I want to talk to you about getting a copy to the show and doing this again sometime soon. Be strong, courageous. Resistance is rising.